Update: would I be the butthole if I stopped baking cookies for the retreats that have come to expect them? It's been more than a year since which I know is quite a long time. It seems a bit silly now that I was so consumed and frustrated by something as small as cookies, but here we go. As a number of the comments suggested, I ended up talking to the owner of the shop and telling her that I wasn't going to bake cookies for the retreats anymore. I told her I felt belittled and disrespected by her behavior and that of the retreaters. Her response was basically, they expect the cookies. What do you expect me to tell them? They're not going to want to come to retreats anymore. You should have never baked them at all. This whole issue is going to be bad for business. I went home feeling completely invalidated. She completely gaslit me. I read and reread some of your comments multiple times and decided to stand my ground on this. She didn't threaten to fire me or anything, not that she could if she needed me, but she continued to guilt trip me and try to manipulate me into baking again. She even had some of the retreaters come to me offering me money to bake for the retreats. At this point, it wasn't about the pay, it was how people were treating me. I refused and started applying to other jobs because I was sick of the environment. The thing is, I'm actually a licensed pharmacist. I was working for minimum wage at a quilt shop because I was burnt out in an oversaturated and overworked field. I was depressed because I was a doctor of pharmacy, 8 years of college completed, and I didn't feel mentally fit for working in that field because of my mental health. I worked for this quilt shop for a year. I learned some things, got a break, and regained some of the mental health I lost. This cookie debacle was the push I needed to regain my self-worth and go back to the field that I wanted to be in. Within a month, I found a job as a pharmacist at a federal prison. I loved it from my first day. I've been there a year now and I love every day of it. My job has meaning, my coworkers are awesome, and every day is a new experience. It took a few months, but I got my baking mojo back. I'm known throughout the prison by my actual name, and people come to visit the pharmacy for some cookies, or whatever baked good I decide upon, and they stay for conversation. I found a job I love and a group of people who appreciate my baking and don't use me as a cookie slave. Thanks, Reddit. You guys are awesome. Web link. Baking for coworkers is such a weird thing. I used to bake a lot when I was single. It was a hobby and I had the time for it. So naturally I brought my goods to work since I didn't want to eat 3 dozen cookies by myself. Everybody loved them and I was happy until one day I overheard some coworkers talking about how it was weird that I baked so much. Weird? Maybe because I was a 27-year-old guy at the time? I was surprised and annoyed. If it's so weird, why are you stuffing your face with my weird cookies? After that I was like, F this, and completely stopped bringing baked goods to work. Of course those same coworkers asked why and I told them I just didn't think it was appropriate anymore, and then that was that. Anyway, I love the outcome to this story and wish you the best in all of your baking and non-baking endeavors. I'm sorry your workmates didn't appreciate your baking. I definitely would have. I also bake a lot for workmates in normal times and they're always super grateful and pleased. My office manager bakes the best banana bread I have ever had, and occasionally I walk into work to see 2 dozen mini loaves. It is like Christmas on those days. Then she messages my kids to make sure I bring some home to them. We do make sure to tell her how grateful we are. She also makes us brownies, chili, broccoli cheese soup. I bring in chocolate every week as my contribution, but she loves that. My aunt used to be the banana bread lady at her office, too. She'd bake a few loaves for them about twice a year or so, and people would actively ask about it all the time. I always feel very lucky that I have the recipe, though I can never make it quite as good as she can, haha. Food always tastes better when someone else has prepared it, at least in my opinion. Absolutely. For me it's especially true with sandwiches. Sandwiches seem better to me if someone else makes them. I'm always honored when people bring in baking. Even if it's not something I'm a huge fan of or didn't turn out super well, I'm always so touched that they spent their time and money making these things to share with us. I was going to say, who complains about yummy baked goods at work? I have an awesome coworker who is an amazing baker and they bring in all kinds of yummy stuff to share. We are all immensely grateful and shower them with praise and thanks, and usually a recipe request. I'm a woman in a male-dominated field and I love when I run into men that also break stereotypes. I worked with a guy in his late 40s who had fairly recently lost a bunch of weight, started some really cool hobbies, and found a sweet, lovely girlfriend. All my coworkers kept making inappropriate comments about him getting married/having a family, and he was way too polite to say anything. I absolutely loved telling them off. Why you asking about his sex life, having kids? Why do you care if he gets married? Sounds like he's got a nice weekend mapped out with his friends. Why are you asking what his girlfriend thinks about it, weirdo? The world needs more people like you. I hate that crap. I baked a slew of cookies for holidays one year, and bagged them in cute bags etc. to give to coworkers. I accidentally saw an email I obviously wasn't supposed to, and one girl told others that she was sure they were poison and had thrown them away. I abhor wasted food, and I had struggled with whether to give them to her in the first place. We weren't friends, but had the same friend. She very clearly didn't like me. This was 15 years ago and you just reminded me of it. Anyway, all this to say, sometimes people just really suck. WTF, who jumps to poison? I've had certain coworkers that I might decline out of concern that possibly their cleaning standards at home aren't as high as they'd want to eat their food, but I'd never think like, oh, this definitely has poison in it, got to be careful. Who jumps to poison? Someone who has fantasized about poisoning her coworkers with beautiful treats and nice gift bags. WTF, who jumps to poison? People with psychiatric disorders. Needs to be higher up. Very common in people with psychotic symptoms to worry about people poisoning their food. So, her brain stopped developing at age 13? What a brat. There are some people in this world that just have to find something to complain about. Hope you didn't take their comments to heart, and I'm sure your other half and family really appreciates all the baking practice you put in. Amen to that. Imagine a world where the guy bringing free cookies to a workplace feel like he's the one doing something wrong. This is why we can't have nice things. Actually, I was that person. I brought in peanut butter chocolate chip cookies after leaving a sheet asking if anyone was allergic to either. And felt like the bad guy because he couldn't have any. But to be fair, no one put anything down on the sheet. I'm happy for you. I know how you feel, as I'm also a baker and actually closed my at-home baking business because people reacted the same way. Good for you for standing up for yourself and finding your mojo. Thank you so much. And I hope that you still love baking despite the awful people, or that you can get your mojo back too. There are awesome people out there that won't behave so terribly. You just have to find them. Reading your original post is so nuts. I've met some incredible bakers in my life/workplaces and have never heard of someone being shoehorned into being expected to always bake, let alone baking one thing or else. Sounds like that shop just had a really toxic environment going on overall. You were smart to recognize it. Glad you're happy in your new job and enjoying experimenting with baking again. Yeah, baking and workplaces are a weird mix. I baked a chocolate cake my colleagues loved for a celebratory occasion in the office. I was traveling for work for the rest of the week. Came back the following week to find the moldy remnants, a dirty plate and an unwashed Tupperware left on my desk. One colleague even commented how moldy it had gotten and how gross it was I'd let it get that way. Stopped baking until I moved to a different team and new office. I'm sorry, what? Maybe I'm spoiled because we have a dishwasher at my office, but the rule is that the person who takes the last piece, we have people with a sweet tooth in our office, there would not have been remnants, puts the plate/Tupperware through the dishwasher. Or the colleague who was being celebrated takes the remainder of the cake home and then brings back clean plates. People are unbelievable. The weirdest thing to me is that no one offered to pay for the cookies. At least to calm the feelings you offer to pay. The relationship might be too far gone by then, but at least if there was a financial transaction it might have improved things. Some of the retreaters offered me money in exchange for the recipe, but I didn't want to share it, mostly because it's mine. I worked hard to make the recipe and I felt cornered. I've shared it before to select people who I know won't go blabbing around. This group of ladies was not like that. I don't mean for the recipe. I mean literally for the cookies. When you said you felt taken advantage of, in nicer terms, the owner should have said, "I'm so sorry you feel that way. We love your cookies. Would you consider making them and I will pay you $20/dozen?" I did, thanks. Now I bake for myself and to share with the people I love. A wonderful feeling. That there are still cookies and bring joy to those who truly need is the second best bit of the story. Best bit is your intelligence and hard-won training is helping people. All because some buttholes at a retreat didn't see who you were. Well, what, you were a pharmacist this entire time? Things certainly turned out for the better. Wow, that's crazy. They really never tell you life is never going to be this way. Damn, that's horrible. The appropriate thing to do if you want someone to bake you something again is just to praise it as lavishly as it deserves and tell them how much you appreciate it. And just leave it alone. That is terrible. In hospitality, you are told to never ask a chef to cook for you, never ask a baker to bake for you, and cooks also have a connect. I wonder how many people stopped going to retreats, if only people had treated you better and appreciated your gift of cookies. But it worked out for you in the end. Glad you have a job you enjoy and can enjoy baking again. A few people pulled out of the retreats. They had been going because they were hoping to get my secret recipe out of me. I don't know why it was so important to them, but I stood my ground on it. The pandemic shut down retreats a few months later anyway, so it doesn't matter. I'm still friends with the owner. She's a much better friend than she was a boss, and her business is actually doing better with the shift to online purchasing. So in the end it worked out for everyone and no real relationships were lost. It's so rare that an ending to a debacle like this is happy for everyone, so I'm savoring this one. You'd think if they were hoping to get a first-class recipe from someone, they would have treated you a bit better. Maybe it's just me, but when I'm trying to schmooze someone, I learn their first name at minimum. Sheesh. I'm glad everything worked out for you and that you found a job where you're appreciated. That's good you're still friends and her business is doing well. I have heard that working for friends can be a bad idea sometimes. We were acquaintances when I started there and we both went through a lot of stuff personally during the time I worked there. It was a small shop, so all the employees ended up getting very close. One of them is actually a roommate/rent-free tenant in my house right now even. It was rocky for a while there, but things improved a lot after that first month of me not working there. People are super weird and entitled about recipes. I used to work in a place where people would being in food frequently, and every time, multiple people would demand the recipes. They would get so mad if you refused. There were even a few times when I just directed them to the cookbook I used and they still got mad because it doesn't taste the same as yours. Whatever. So glad you got your baked Joe back, and it sounds like your mental health is much better and that you're more appreciated too. I make Chex Mix as part of my Christmas baking every year. Without fail, someone asks what I do to make it taste so good. I always tell them I follow the recipe on the box. Oh, you must do something special. No, literally the recipe on the box. But it tastes so good. Yep, that's how they designed it. I think people underestimate the I'm not the one who made this factor. I'm really bad about changing the amount of ingredients in my pie recipe, so anytime someone asks, I'm like, if you look up this pie recipe and then add such and such, that's what I did. They're never satisfied with my answer, but truthfully the only recipes I follow to the letter are cake recipes. I always add more chocolate chips or nuts than called for, I always double the amount of frosting, I always add more cinnamon, or if a recipe calls for only cinnamon I use pumpkin pie mix instead, cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, cardamom, fine lemon peel, and that is almost always what has people clamoring for the recipe. I'm just always tweaking something and I never remember to tell people what. Yes. I change recipes all the time, or don't even use one, except for baking. Got to have a starting point for baking. I think of recipes as guidelines, not hard and fast rules, and I never write down my changes because they're never the same twice. My mom says baking is as much a talent as a skill, and some people just can't make a recipe taste the same as someone else no matter how hard they try or how exact the recipe is. Even on Reddit, the overwhelming response about secret recipes is to share recipes. What's the point of hoarding them, etc. Sorry, but sometimes I want to be known as the person who brings the dish and it's my special dish. Usually I'll share or point them to the cookbook it's in, but if I don't feel like it, no one is entitled to it. I do get both sides. Sometimes you want to enjoy a dish without having to rely on someone bringing it, or those who want to keep their recipes secret for their reason. I do think though it just comes down to consent. Recipes would be best to be shared, but if you don't want to, that's okay and you shouldn't be shamed for not sharing. Wow, that's awesome. Very happy to hear such a positive outcome from your experiences. Thank you. It's been a fantastic year, global events notwithstanding. Now whenever someone calls me Cookie Lady, I know it's a friendly nickname and not my entire identity to them. You're one of those people that people will remember their whole life. Prisoners and co-workers who hate their job or circumstance will remember the kindness and compassion of Cookie Lady, and they'll look on that time with a smile. Really wish I had a person like her during my time in the walls. Unfortunately, I can't give the inmates baked goods, it's against the rules. But I do make every effort to treat them with kindness and address them by their names instead of numbers. When you treat people like animals, they have no choice but to become animals. You sound like a great person. Keep up the great work. Even though I wouldn't have been able to try anything you made, it would have been awesome to have you around. The inmates you work with are lucky to have you. This is what social media is good for and should do more of. Building up a fellow human and helping them feel better and do better for themselves. Good job all around. I'm glad things worked out well for you. I do wonder about the business model of a quilt shop where the owner thinks people will only come to quilting events if there's a particular type of cookie, though. The emphasis for them should have been on the fun and learning together of quilting, not just cookies. I don't know you, but your update really makes me happy for you. If you ever decide to write a memoir, please call it Cookies, Quilts and Convicts. What a wonderful update. Thank you for watching. If you like our videos, please like them on YouTube and share them with your friends. Please subscribe to be the first to know about Red Rabbit Reader's new videos. We welcome your comments below. Another of our videos will begin shortly.